The FNRad Snowboard Podcast is presented by Vans. Season 8 of FNRad is sponsored by Wired Snowboards, Anon Optics, the Boardroom Snowboard Shop, FindAnEpicAgent.com, and Tribute Board Shop in Nelson, BC. Wired Snowboards create hand-built, high-quality snowboards right here in Vancouver, BC. Devin Walsh joined the Wired team and is riding his souped-up Vancouver Canucks board right now. It's awe-inspiring to see Devin hitting the Seymour side hits, as he's simply one of the greatest snowboarders to ever do it for a living. Devin and a giant crew of notable snowboard celebrities recently took a trip to Japan to celebrate JF Pelchat's 50th birthday, and the snow god smiled upon them. Rob built Devin a custom chase, and although Devin expected to ride it maybe only once or twice, he ended up using it pretty much the entire trip. Powder boards seriously work in powder. Getting a Chase 162 changed my life forever, and I'm happy to report that Devin Walsh and listener Heinke Donneberg have experienced the same transformation after riding their own chase boards. You can order a Wired board through an authorized dealer near you, or go to wiredsnowboards.com to check out everything Wired Snowboards has to offer. Support also comes from Dakine, Grouse Mountain, Mount Seymour, Pro Standard GoPro accessories, and Volcom Outerwear. We're almost at 500 subscribers of our YouTube channel. You could be one of them and watch the show on YouTube and get the show directly into your YouTube feed. Please subscribe. If you'd like to win a free 1910 hoodie or long sleeve t-shirt with a Scof and Jamie Lynn art collab on it, pause the show, go to the FNRad YouTube channel and comment, "I want free 1910 shit" in the comments of this episode, or tag 3 friends in the Instagram post along with @1910, and I'll pick a winner this Sunday. Jamie Lynn and Scof make a super sick art team, and this is an early release thing, so the clothes are amazing. Trust me, you want some. Special thanks this episode to Beneath Apparel, Tomahawk Indigenous Products, and be sure to check out Kaya J and the Drink Ticket's new album, Better. Jason Ford is a legendary pro snowboarder who left the Burton International Pro Team to start Ride Snowboards with Tim Pogue, Jamie Salter, and a group of people who would change the world. Jason Ford was being groomed for a Burton Pro model when he quit his contract. He designed and rode ride boards for 2.5 years before joining Solomon Snowboards, before they even had made their first snowboards. Jason Ford's first pro career on Burton saw him going toe-to-toe in competitions against Brushy, Kelly, Palmer, Duckboy for a true world champion title, and the amount of coverage he got on Burton was just insane. Jason Ford was snowboarding's golden boy during snowboarding's golden era, and I couldn't be more stoked to have him on the show.
So Burton got a coach. They moved us all to Tahoe. We had a big team. I think there was 14 of us. There was 2 houses.
Oh my God, do you think you could remember all 14? That's a lot of people.
Yeah, there's a lot. Don't make me do it.
Okay,
But yeah. There were some big names in there.
There
the
were.
Classics,
Yeah.
the Brushies, the Craigs, Doc Jacoby. I think Warburton and Jimmy Scott were my roommates.
Nice. Oh yeah, I forgot Jeff Davis was in that group as well.
Andy Coughlin, there was
Yeah.
Eric Webster,
Yeah.
guys like that. There was a racing crew, there was a freestyle crew, but Jeremy was a racing coach.
Yeah.
And yeah, we had Boreal passes, and that's where we trained. And there would be powder days, and he sent gates, and we're kind of like, what are we doing? And people were sneaking off in their race boards and riding POW, and they did not work in powder.
And you were bunk mates with Jimmy and
Warburton.
And Warbs. Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was classic. And it was and upstairs, was like Andy Coughlin and Webster and Brushy. And I don't remember who had the third bedroom because they were up in the loft, those guys.
So what about food and stuff? Is there a cook and everything at this place?
No, the house was covered. Cook, jeez. Maybe at Craig's house. Craig was over at a different place with Noah and Duck and a few others. But I think we just made our food. We just made cereal, like in the breakfast. You know, we had cereal for breakfast,
Yeah.
lunches on the hill.
Yeah.
You know, I was the type of guy that just had something sugary for lunch. I just have a brownie for lunch, just like enough to like get you back and then survive the day. And then, you know, you go home and you make something or grab McDonald's.
Wow.
It was pretty simple. But that year we, you know, we worked on fitness. We ran. We were supposed to run 2 miles every morning. We were supposed to do, you know, push-ups and dips and all these things, plus being on the hill. And Jerry was kind of a little bit more like combat style and the way he'd set courses.
I love it.
So it was really cool and hard.
Yeah.
And then, you know, you come out of the first contest, or out to the first contest was in Blackcomb. And the Burton guys, I think it was a GS, I won. And then everybody on our team placed, like of the top 15 spots, we had like 11.
Oh, wow.
Burton just mopped it up. It was crazy.
How many years was that there was training down there?
I think there was 3.
That's awesome.
I think we had Jerry for 2, because the next year was Donner's son, Donner.
Yeah.
And then we switched to this guy, Bill Benyon, after that. And I don't know why there was the change. And then I just, you know, I stopped racing after that.
Yeah, Jacoby talked about some drama with Jerry, a girl, you know.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, him and Tara got married, Tara Eberhardt.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing that was the girl.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Worked out.
Yeah, totally. Well, Jim Rippey was saying that he asked you guys, what board should I get? And he ended up getting the Air 6-1.
Yeah.
Because I can't remember
Jeff.
if it's stiffer or if it's softer.
Well, Brushy was the air guy.
Yeah.
And then they made the ASM airs, which they put me on.
Yeah.
And then, you know, Craig had his boards. But in the beginning, we all wanted to ride Craig's boards. And then he just started discouraging us off of Craig's boards, probably because they didn't want to, you know, just pile up the royalties.
Yeah.
Diversify it a little bit, you know.
But everybody did ride the Craig's boards eventually.
As long as we could.
Yeah.
Until they just...
Oh, so it
was like a mandate. They just stopped riding Craig's board.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Like they're like, you got to pick something else.
It was better. I mean, we just liked...
Yeah.
You know, like Craig's purple board.
Yeah.
I felt like I rode really well on that one.
Yeah.
And then they took that thing away from me and then, you know, put me on the first ASM Air.
Yeah, Rippy was talking about how those ASMs were pretty narrow, right?
All the boards are narrow, especially I have a size 13 foot, so it was a challenge for me.
Yeah. What would you do? You'd put camp pads or...
I would grind everything down. I would wear smaller boots, ride with bent toes, and grind everything. You know, still ride a smaller boot.
Yeah, because of that, you just got used to it.
Well, now the boards are wider, and I'm like, oh, I can actually ride a foot where I can wiggle my toes. Like, it's crazy. You know?
Yeah.
But, yeah, you just dealt with it. You know, it wasn't made for a size 12 boot.
Oh, there wasn't a board.
And I'm a 13, so I'd be in an 11.5 or a 12 boot.
Oh, wow.
And I just do a different liner and grind it down, and so it wasn't warm.
Until the Fat Bob, there really wasn't anything that was made.
And the Fat Bob, the Fat Bob had the width, but then everything else was lame. Like, you know,
it was like a popsicle stick. Yeah, it's true.
It's like they got one piece of it correct. And then, you know, some of the wide boards that came out, I remember hating the way they performed because it felt like it took forever to go from edge to edge.
Totally.
You know, because they just hadn't worked out the rest of the dimensions. To
the
make them
geometry.
function.
Yeah, it's absolutely.
And now the boards
true.
are, you know, they're wider and they're great. They ride awesome.
Yeah, I mean, there are some taper boards that are just super short, big fat nose. Yeah. I remember I rode like a wide board during that Fat Bob era, and it was great in powder as far as like compared to a cut down narrow board of the same length. But yeah, they were so lanky. They were so bad. But then we also had like low backs or whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We were confused.
It's like the sport of snowboarding loves to pursue confusion. You know?
Yep.
It's like, oh, this works really good.
Yeah.
You know what we should do? Let's change it.
We have to
lot.
change it every year a lot.
Let's really change
so that last
it.
year's stuff is completely obsolete, which came out of the fact that last year's stuff was obsolete because nobody was making anything good. So it was really exciting every year.
Well, I had
you
a
get
couple
something
years
good.
ago. Board showed up. I pulled it out of the thing. I'm staring at this. I'm like, this is the weirdest looking snowboard I've ever seen. I looked at this board for 5 minutes before I realized it was upside down. I was looking. I had the tail as the nose, and I'm like, oh my god, I hate it. You know. And I rode fine,
Yeah.
but I'm like, I look down, and I'm just not. You know, it's half of the game is looking down and being excited about what you're on in any sport, right?
Yeah.
When I look down and feel like, no, this is the right setup for me.
Yeah, when Rippy was showing off his first board, the Air 6.1, the one that says Air on the top, but when he flipped it over and you see those, like, I don't know what that font is. It's like brick Burton letters, and then the Air on the tail, and he's kicking it out. He's like, when you kick it out, the Air it just looks so good with that Air right on the tail, which it did.
Yeah.
Like, it was everything in the magazines for 2 years. 2 years straight, 3 years maybe, 3 years straight. Just every good shot had the Air, the base of that board.
Yep.
Unreal. Yeah, like your Tuckney over the cat.
Yeah, the Technique over the cat has it still shows up. It's it was a good one. It's definitely one of my more iconic photos for sure.
Yeah, who took that one?
Rod Walker.
Oh, I don't even know who that is.
So Rod is a Colorado photographer. He
Right.
kind of vanished for a while, but he's reemerged. You can find him.
Yeah.
If you look for him on social. But I don't know how, he's a skier. I don't know who found him, but he was really good. Like when Trevor and I used to work together a lot, and I would tell him what Rod did.
Oh, nice.
And so Trevor, adapted and found his own sort of model. But like, I'd come back as like Rod brought this energy. He'd be like, yeah, he'd get you all stoked. Like, but you just did something. You want to run back up there and do it again,
Yep.
Try something different. So he carried that energy. He was really fun. He was a bit adventurous.
Cool.
My first Burton photo shoot that I did, officially like a travel one, was in Colorado with Noah Brandon, Brad Reeser, and Betsy Shaw.
Brad.
And we drove all through different parts of Colorado, and we weren't really sure what we shot. He had us shooting like all his lifestyle stuff, so we're like standing around in front of some saloon entrance and in the street and a town, and it was all these shots that didn't really get used, like thousands of them maybe. And then so it was pretty funny because we look back and we're like, yeah, it was kind of lame. But there was some shots, we went sandboarding in Alamosa in the dunes, which was, I still want to go back there and just check it out because it was so beautiful. And those photos that Rod captured, no matter where it was, always had pop. They were super sharp. They were really vibrant.
The colors are like it stuck with me. Yeah.
Yeah, and that Baker shoot was an overcast day. It wasn't a nice day. The mountain was closed. They pushed up a jump. We started hitting it. We put the cat under it.
Really?
Yeah, and then
I think of it as a sunny, vibrant day. But
it wasn't. I don't remember it being that way. I mean, we had some sun pockets, but it wasn't. It's just the fact that the colors.
Yeah, the colors are great.
We were wearing the colors. The cat was red.
Yeah.
Some of the guys were board sliding a rail on the cat.
Oh wow, That's so early for that.
Yeah, I think that's 90.
90 or 91. Yeah, That makes total sense. So how do you get on the Burton team?
For me, when I was snowboarding for Barfoot, so I got sponsored by Barfoot in high school.
How?
Andy Coughlin basically vouched for me. So I was competing, and you go from these things where you just want to snowboard and do it and learn how to do it, and then you go to these contests because it's like, oh, I want to go to the contest and see other people and see how I do, and you get results, and they're marginal. And then you're like, I want new equipment, but it costs money I don't have. So if I can get it for free, we'll get sponsored. And in my high school, the Halls, Steve and Greg Hall lived there. Greg was on the first Burton team. And so he's part of like the first catalogs and all that stuff.
Oh, rad.
And then Steve would get all the free stuff from Greg. And then Noah Brandon was in my high school. And so
wow.
they were getting free. So there was like already a connection, like they're getting free stuff. Maybe I can get free stuff.
Yeah.
And then, I wanted to do something different than Burton. And Barfoot, Chuck responded, and Andy, gave him a call and said, yeah, you should pick him up. And so I went to the Purgatory. They were like the time trials, they called them.
Yeah.
In '88. And it was my first year out of high school. I was sleeping on the floor at the Barfoot house.
Oh, wow. Like Chuck and Ernie and Evan and all those guys?
Well, it was a team house.
Yeah.
So it was like Estes and,
Oh, wow.
some of those guys.
Yeah.
And so I was sleeping on the floor there, and then riding the pipe, Steve Hall, my friend, comes up and says, hey, Jake asked me if you want to ride for Burton. And I'm like, get out of here. I'm like, I'd die to ride for Burton. He's like, well, I'm like, you're kidding, right? And he's like, no, I'm serious. And so I went down and talked to him. I talked to John Yusko, who's the manager. And next thing I know, I'm reading a contract and, moving over for product.
Amazing. Yeah.
Product and incentives.
Yeah, because Chuck complains a lot about Burton stealing his team.
Yeah.
So that's. I always wondered about who he's talking about, because Boyer didn't go to Burton, and
Boyer stayed.
Estes
He was a
Burton.
Chuck loyalist, and
Yeah.
so was Estes. And
Yeah.
But for me, it was, Burton was 30
easy
minutes from my
decision.
house.
Yeah, yeah,
How could I not be interested in that?
yeah. Of course. So, what's the first board that you pick?
I picked that, the Air, the first Air.
Yeah, yeah.
Before they put mystery on it.
yeah.
Okay, buddy. Come here. All right.
Yeah, that very first Air, a little bit more pointy, and
Not that one, not the blue and
The next one.
The next one, the
Yeah.
black one that
Yeah.
was the mystery Air, but
Yeah.
it just didn't have mystery written on mine.
Oh wow, that'd be a very valuable board. Huh?
Noah sent me one. I've got one that's only been on snow a day.
Oh wow.
The garage just showed up in the mail one day.
Where the heck did it come from?
Noah had it.
No.
Just showed up and said, enjoy.
That's so
I'm
nuts.
like, you're kidding me.
Yeah,
It's
that's
so
incredible.
awesome.
I have like a visceral feeling about Burton at that time, like the way that the bindings fit. Because before that we'd been direct mounting. I'd been direct mounting my boards.
Mm-hmm.
So like to have, machined screws that fit like in inserts and like go in the little pockets of the bindings, and then drilling out the bindings to try and get better, angles or whatever. And just the way the high backs didn't really fold. They were supposed to, but like if you did,
You're talking the yellow
they'd
high
break.
backs?
The white ones with the
Yeah.
air on the
Oh, yeah.
back,
Mhm.
or even or the black ones the year after with the blue kind of ninja star.
Yeah, so
on
that
them.
first year was the yellow high backs.
Yeah.
Same ones, and then they went to the white with the
Yeah.
Air.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's when I got the Craig. I got Craig boards, so I had the first, like the ketchup mustard, but it was white, yellow, black.
Ooh, those are rare too.
Yeah.
Yeah, those were team boards. That was
Mhm.
team colors. Yeah. So does your snowboarding instantly improve?
Yeah, I started winning.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I did. I just started winning stuff.
Like right away. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I only got one board.
Yeah. Wow.
So I got that board, and then I borrowed race boards from Jenny Hahn. So she had all these prototypes and all these different things. And so at the time, Jake was into I'd heard he was into BMW, so all the boards were M's, So there was a board at M14 that I was really fast on.
Yeah.
And so I would pick it up from Jenny on Thursday.
Yeah.
I would, hand tune it, wax it, race it, and then I'd return it on Sunday, and I'd win.
Were your results in both categories, like in racing and in freestyle?
Yeah, so New England Cup, we were doing that, and I was winning, pipes, which you laugh, it looks like a plowed driveway more than a half pipe. And then I was winning moguls, I was winning all the racing stuff. I was sort of doing, and I won the overall.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
and then that was a change for me. So it went from having one board and one pair of boots and one jacket and buying pants to
They
all
give
of a
you the
sudden,
pro form, right?
I started
right.
getting a lot more.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Then the next year was the Burton House in Tahoe.
Yeah.
They moved us out,
the heyday
and
of
I
the
was
team.
on the A team, the Burton A team.
So did the Burton A team travel around and do demos and stuff at that time as well as training together?
So that year, I mean, that's the same year we filmed Scream, so it came out the following season.
Yeah.
pretty sure it's the first year we filmed Scream. So, I wasn't doing demos yet. I mean, we do East Coast demos. We like trampoline demos, and back in those days.
Yeah.
But we competed. We traveled together. They made a mid-season cut of the team. Basically, they kicked people off the world tour.
Wow.
So half the team, or a bunch of the team riders went home. And then
that would have been a bummer. Were you like worried that might happen to you?
No, because I was leading.
Got it.
In the points, so it was fine for me. But I couldn't. The pressure of being chased. Excuse me, like being chased for the lead. Chasing the lead, I was really into. I liked doing that.
Yeah.
But having the lead, the points lead, and running from people.
Interesting.
Was something that I didn't know how to deal with.
Right.
Because you're 19, 20 years old.
Yeah.
And you're just sort of doing this.
And is Craig still competing at this point?
Yeah, I was ahead of Craig.
Holy shit.
Points. And then, and so you're, like, I didn't even realize it until we're in Seymour, and I'm sitting there at the top of the pipe, and I hear below me is Tim Wendell and Paolo Dabini. And Paolo's like, so who's like the top guy in the in the States now? And I hear Tim say my name.
Yeah. And
Paolo's like, who's that? And then Tim looks back and points at me. And I was like, whoa.
Like what?
I'm the guy to beat. I mean, it never occurred to me.
Right.
So that didn't sit well. And then the racing, which was my strongest suit, I didn't do that great.
Really? It just got inside your head.
Well, I didn't. I certainly didn't podium, but I don't think I was top 10 or something. And then the pipe, I don't know how well I did. I wasn't happy with it. And then I decided to not go to Japan, and instead I did a photo shoot. I went and traveled around Trans World, and we did this like Switzerland, France thing.
Oh, sick! Who was on that shoot?
Rado, Oliver. Sorry, Oliver, I'm forgetting your last name right now. Oliver Holtz.
Yeah, I remember that.
Mm-hmm.
I remember the pictures from that.
Yeah, and then there was, Fran Richards wrote the story.
Yeah.
He took some photos. Lee wrote the story. Lee Crane wrote the story. And Fran shot the photos. So we traveled around Verbier and Chamonix and did a bunch of stuff. So it was really cool. So instead of going to Japan, Brushy, who was going to be sent home, took my seat to go to Japan, and then he won the contest in Japan.
So Brushy was on the edge. That was the story.
He was on
a cut
line.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, it was crazy. It made no sense. But that's how it started to
cut from the team or just cut from the tour?
Send you home, like where you're getting off the world,
But you're still on.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I get it. I mean,
But it went
was
from there.
Probably unnecessary.
All these people went to Whistler.
Yep.
Competed in the Blackcomb contest, and then everyone went to Europe. And then after that, only some people go to Japan. And no one saw that coming. And you're like, whoa, this is different. This isn't like, and no one's really talking about it.
Yeah, because everybody's young and you don't
just
know
happy to be there.
On. Yeah, exactly. So, you didn't go to Japan?
I didn't go. No, I went and did the photo shoots, and I learned pretty quickly. I was like, ooh, well, that's a different way to play this game.
Right.
Less pressure.
Yeah, so much more fun, right?
It was really fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we did that, and then I came back, and I can't remember the contest that followed, but there were several. It was probably like Breck and the Open and things like that, and I finished the year, North American champion for giant slalom, and second overall in slalom, and second overall. I won the Canadian Tour. So, my contest results were good.
Yeah.
I didn't, my last slalom race that I had for the season, I think was the US Open, or second to last. And I butt checked, and I was pissed, and I kind of stomped my feet through the finish line, and I ended up jumping the beam. So I got a DNF.
No.
Which is why, Craig beat me that year for the overall. Craig got first, I got second.
So you could have been that first
slot.
Yeah,
it's like I just never, none of this stuff ever occurred to me where I wasn't chasing the result. I was chasing personal performance.
Yep.
And, you know, you're younger and emotional and stupid. So, you know, you like have a little temper tantrum, and next thing you know, you get a DNF, and then you run the math, and you're like, shoot.
If you would
That was
have
the title.
Yeah, the title was
just like that.
Yeah.
You know, and, you know, I would speculate that Craig was smarter than me and knew all that was doing that math.
Right. Well, it really mattered to him.
He's a good guy to lose to, though.
Yeah, of course, of course. And was that the last year that he won the overall? Because Dakine took it the next year, or maybe 2 years later.
Yeah, like Dakine, I don't remember who did it afterwards, but like Dakine, and then of course Bertrand, you know, was always really good at it.
Yeah.
It became like a European thing. Craig lost interest in competing in Alpine.
Yeah.
And a lot of people did. And it, you know, it was a couple more years for me before I totally stopped buckling to hard boots and race boards.
Yeah, there was that Kildee board when you joined Ride. But was there a Ford race board? No, there was just the big red Ford and the little gold one.
We had done with Burton. There was, you know, I hated my equipment. We were on these PJs that were really soft, and you know, what the product team had told me was, when I was complaining to them about the equipment, I was like, these aren't working for me. I'm using more power. I want to put a lot of energy into the board. I want a lot back, and I want this wide thing. It's torsionally too soft. The shapes are all wrong. The length is wrong. Everything is off. And they told me that, you know, when you start winning again, we'll start listening to you. Jesus. And I was like, so then somebody agreed to make a prototype. Yeah. And they, you know, it was Kildee and I designed it. This is when we were living in the condos up at Donner Ski Ranch. And took a long time to get it. And they called it the KF1, but they're like, you can never tell anyone it's that. You can't name it the KF1. It's not a pro model. Like, they're really adamant about that. But it showed up after I decided to never race again. And so I've got one. I've got it in the garage. It's never been mounted.
So the Kildee Ford one.
That's, the KF1.
And is that built?
There's two of them made.
That was built by Burton.
It was a Burton, yeah. And then,
wow.
And then, you know, I think it might have been the next year or so, you know, was when we left to go to Ride, and Kildee came over, and then he started building, you know, he built the 1 year of Ride race boards. Yeah. Which were the boards I was looking for. And they look like today's race boards, you know, but those were the equipment I was looking for to compete in, because I couldn't ride those, you know, those asymmetrical PJs. They didn't work for me. Yeah, they were more like free carving boards. They were very European influenced. Mm-hmm. And John and Peter they just had a different style, you know, they had a different approach to the hill. Yeah. And, you know, like more finesse, you know, they had a lot of that. No, we wanted to just attack. Yeah. Yeah. Well, you were trying to go fast. Right. Jerry was teaching us was the attack. You know, so they and Mark Fawcett, you know, was getting these Sims boards, or K2 boards, I think, at the time, and they were the ones. You know, we're like, Fuzzy's fast, and like we need to have equipment like that. Yeah, he was unbeatable for a couple of years in there, and you know, he definitely has the skills, but he had some equipment that was working in his favor too. So he put all the pieces together. Yeah, I think that happened to him afterwards. That all of a sudden there were these race boards that were that next generation. That he was like, I can't catch these guys. Yeah. What's going on here? Like, it's a change in geometry or whatever. Yeah. I do remember those Ride race boards looking pretty slick. I never rode it. You never even rode it? I never picked one up. Yeah. Never touched one. We had them in the shop. So your board was made to be compatible with those horseshoe bindings. Not at first. Not the first one. At first, I just had the Burton bindings. Oh, did you? With stickers on the. You didn't rock the Preston bindings that were the. Those are awful. I wouldn't. Everybody wanted them where we were. We sold out of them. I mean, they seemed to be popular, but they were not good. No, they weren't. Like most equipment back then, it wasn't good. Yeah. But yeah, the boards are made of Palais, I think, and they're heavy, and you know, we talked about these narrow boards before, and the big feet. Like, I got to go to a mid-wide, so all my boards were 258 in the waist. Yeah, was the width I always did, and you know, that worked for the boots I was squeezing into. Yeah. And then we played with, you know, different shapes, and we tried flat the kinks, and you know, these things were were kind of fun, and we talked ourselves into why it was smart to have these things, but in the end we just thought it resembled skateboarding was cool.
Yeah, I mean those boards were hands down the coolest boards of that year. I don't know what they were going directly up against at Burton. Is that like the sword board and the brushy trout, or
Maybe.
were you there for that?
No, I'd already left, I think, by the time the trout came out.
Yeah. So your first board, am I getting it right with the big one was red?
So the big one was red, and I never rode that one either. Because I was just riding
69 or something?
It was a 174.
It was huge.
Big. Someone sent me one recently. So
Really?
I actually have one now.
That's
it's got a bigger sticker on it.
Oh, nice.
And then the Ford Pipe, it was called. And
Yeah.
So it was a 58.
Yeah. And that one was gold.
It was gold, yeah. So the original was like a green top sheet with like this weird graphic of an oil spill, and it was so poorly
I don't know that
done.
I ever saw that.
It never happened because I spray painted it gold.
Right.
And then we went to Jamie's house on our way to Japan, and Tim's like, show Jamie your board, and I unzipped it and I pulled out this thing, and it was actually brass was the color.
Yeah.
And he's like, what's that? And he's like, what'd you do to the top sheet? I'm like, we spray painted. We hate the graphics.
Hate them.
And we're just gonna. He's like, well, it's too late to change. This thing is happening. I was like, well, do whatever you're gonna do. We're just gonna spray paint. Can of spray paint's cheap.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's like, really? And then Jamie looked at Tim. He goes, change them all.
Wow.
And we changed them all that day. I mean, they stopped whatever they were doing, and they redid it, and we all did like the single color top sheets, and that was the rollout of basically the second round of boards, because the first one was that spark plug
board.
So imagine it's just an iteration of that awfulness.
Yeah.
And so we got something that was a little more subdued.
So I started at Boardroom in 93, September 93. So there was a couple of those Ride spark plug boards left over.
Mm-hmm.
And having something left over in those days meant it was bad, like very bad. Like, because things just sold out. Like, they never made it to Christmas.
Yeah.
And so if Ride would have kept going in that direction.
It was a pretty big mess.
Well, did you hear Jamie talking about, like, he was thinking of multi-sport for Ride too, right? Like Ride scooters and Ride skateboards and Ride bikes and all that stuff. Like, that did not come across in the Jason Ford era Ride. It was like, this is core, but also chasing Burton as far as like, the availability of product shipping on time. And you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like a lot of companies were like a couple guys in the garage, and Ride was not that at all.
Ride appeared to be not that, but it was a lot of that. I think you have to hand it to Tim and even Jamie for listening to Tim.
Yeah,
because he had the ability to not listen to Tim.
Yeah, absolutely.
At any moment he wanted to, and so Tim, always, and I don't know if this was sort of coming through the Burton culture, because the team had a lot of voice at Burton.
Yeah.
And it was encouraged. It was actually in your contract that you were supposed to communicate on a regular basis about product, about what you're doing, and it was up to the riders to do that. And so, that was how I was taught.
Yeah.
It's how Tim was part of that process when he was team manager over there. And so, it seemed to make its way to Ride, and had they gone the other way, it would have been a different story. Who knows where it would have ended up and how the whole thing would have shaped. I probably wouldn't have stayed for the 2.5 years I did, but like,
right.
It was cool what we, I think that first year was, I wasn't even riding a Ride board. I was riding a different board that had a Ride spray paint stencil on it.
Right.
And then Russell and Jake were riding, the first versions of the boards that came out.
Yeah.
And then we quickly went to, the Ford Pipe and the longboard, and then we got to like the real Ride.
Yeah,
came out.
those were really good.
Yeah.
Like that, just the line was small, but it was powerful. Like there wasn't, yeah, I remember, I think the brochure was just like a single sheet.
Uh-huh.
But it felt like a big company. So were you there until it was till it went public? Of course, yeah.
After, yeah.
Yeah.
So I was there 2.5 years was how long the contract was, and I just chose not to renew.
I've talked about that story probably 1,000 times since you told it to me, like that you called a broker from the Yellow Pages or something. You just like called a broker, and then that guy sent you a cell phone and was like, "Buddy, you're gonna want this." Is that kind of how it went? I might have not been listening.
More or less, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I still have the same cell phone that James, my stockbroker at the time, sent me.
Yeah.
And
how old were you? You're in early 20s?
I think we went public in 94.
Mm-hmm.
So I was 24.
Oh, wow. Just such a crazy story. Oh, yeah, and that the check bounced, or that you had to get...
Yeah, so the way that went down was, it's so funny because we did this once, right?
Yeah. But I just love it. I think
so my first, part of my agreement was that I could invest up to 5% of the company at the raise price. So I wrote a check for $10,000. I got 1% of the company, and my check bounced because it's every dollar I had to my name.
Yeah.
And Tim called me. He's like, "Jason, your check bounced." I was like, "Try it again. It will clear. I promise it'll clear."
Yeah.
And it cleared, and it was every dollar I had to my name I put in, and then away it goes. The company, the company went public, and I didn't know anything about that. I'd never owned a stock. I'd never learned about companies being traded publicly or what that meant. I got a little bit of a lesson then.
Yeah.
At some point we thought we were all traders, because you wake up and rides on the ticker, and you're kind of, talking to your broker, and you're moving shares, and now you're IPO stuff, and you're part of this, .com bubble.
Yeah.
So everything's easy. Everyone's making money. You just have to play.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then it goes the other way for a while, and you get that taste. So yeah, it was a pretty cool lesson as a 24, 25, 26-year-old.
Yeah, like gambling on such a major level.
Yeah, like even to this day, if I go and make $100 bet in Vegas, I'm nervous.
Yes.
And
Right.
$100, you can't even enter the building on Wall Street. They're like, no, you need more than that, bud.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's nuts.
But yeah, we wake up and stock's up a few bucks, and you're like, how many shares do I have? And you do the math, and you're like, dang, that's pretty good.
Did you trade it for a house at some point or anything like that? Or did you watch it go up and then watch it coming down?
No, I bought a house in Solana Beach. We were all hanging out at Pacific Drive, this skate and surf shop. And we got to know, it was a really cool scene back then. This place is in Pacific Beach. And there was a guy, Chico, that was in there all the time, and he was an accountant. And he worked with a bunch of the surfers and stuff. And
Rad.
And so I asked him to go to lunch, and we sat there, and I told him what was going on. I said, hey, here's what my financial situation is. And he said, you should probably buy a house. And, I left, and 2 months later, I see him again. And he's like, what have you been doing? I was like, I bought a house. He's like, you're kidding. And so I bought a house in Solana Beach, and
Rad.
And started to do that, and, kind of went forward. And the stock luckily went in the right direction, and it's not like I nailed the peak getting out of it, but
right.
I did pretty good.
Oh, that's cool. And so at this point, okay, so you do 2.5 years on Ride. I would have thought it was longer than that, but yeah, it's just those first couple of years. There were 3 pro models of yours, right?
There was 3, and the 4th was designed.
Yeah.
It just never came to light. But yeah, it was a short one. We had this incredible movement. In the sport was going. I went from Burton, which was a team of individuals, to Ride, which was a very close team.
Yeah.
And we traveled as a team. We had each other's back as a team, and we everywhere we went, we were a unit.
Cool.
And that was very rare. It didn't exist.
Yeah.
And so it didn't matter what we showed up to, we would draw a crowd, and that was fun.
Yeah.
And so that dynamic was like some of my most fond memories in snowboarding.
Of course.
And then when Ride went public, and then things started to change. You know, it's like some people made a lot of money, things got weird. And the dynamic went from a we to an I. And I just sort of lost, it's like the dream went away a little bit for me, and I needed to mix it up.
Yeah.
You know, and then all of a sudden it's like people are vying for your job, and it's all this stuff, and I'm like, you know, I'm gonna go a different direction.
Yeah, were you like the team captain to, you know, go with the
I didn't have a C on my jersey, but there was definitely I had to rent the cars and I had to pay for everything. And, you know, Ride's got this 30-year film coming out right now.
Yeah,
and we were at the premiere, and I see Dale, and this is like a few days after his 50th birthday.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you're 50. He's like, yeah. I was like, I'm 52. All these years, you guys are acting like I'm your fucking dad. I'm 2 years older than you.
You're the same
I'm
age
2 years
now.
older
Yeah,
than
yeah,
you.
yeah.
2. He's like, well, you seem so much more mature. I was like, everywhere I went, I had to deal with it, you know?
Unreal. Yeah, yeah.
2 years. So funny. But yeah, so it was a little bit of that.
Where are some memorable ride trips? Because I've heard this from even, like, I talked to Chris Swears, and he was on Liquid.
Yeah.
And even the Liquid guys were there. It was like everybody. It was
and
like
the 5150 guys were there.
5150 guys,
and,
yeah.
you know, we're traveling through Japan, and it's like Liquid and 5150 and Ride. So it's all the crew, you know, from Ranquet to everybody.
That's incredible.
And we're just raising hell. I mean, you know, we did this one trip where in Japan, you know, they told us it was a 3 or 4 hour bus ride. We got on the bus, the first thing you do, everyone's getting beers and they're having drinks, and there's a karaoke machine, and it's all in Japanese, and we're making up words, and it's a lot of fun, and this is a 4-hour trip, and we're going to do it. And 4 or 5 hours goes by, and we say, hey, what's up? Are we there yet? And they say, oh, it's 4 hours more. I'm like, what? It ends up being like a 12-hour drive. And I don't know why, but it takes that long to go from start to finish. So when you begin a 4-hour journey, you're prepping that's your timeline, right? Yeah. Timeline gets extended. So now people are like hungover on the, you know?
Yeah.
And so we get to this place, and it's this little, it was a golf course in the summer. There's a lift, and it's not a lot of gain in elevation, but there's a lot of snow. And we managed to hijack all these miniature snowmobiles.
Mini snowmobiles.
And they're like little 80s or 100s or something.
Okay.
They're small. Everything about them is like shrunk.
Cool.
And so Jake and I are walking around just looking for something to do at this hotel because we're kind of bored inside. And we find a real snowmobile, and we open it up. We're going to hotwire this thing. We have no idea what we're doing. I don't think you can hotwire a snowmobile because we didn't. And so that was stupid. So we keep walking around the other side, and then there's got to be 20 of these things. They're all lined up, and they're all numbered. And we find this door that opens up into this big room. And there's like some barriers or whatever in a desk, and Jake's like shaking the drawers. And he finds when he's shaking the door, it's locked, but he can hear keys in there. And he reaches in behind, he's fishing out with his fingertips like keys, and you look at it and you're like, 12.
No.
And go out there and you stick the key in there, and 12, snowmobile fires up.
No.
And away we go. And so Jake and I basically burn a tank of gas on each of these things.
Yeah.
And it's like, there's so much snow that you could porpoise. You could go completely under the snow. Headlight is gone, dark, and then come back out. And we had so much fun. And so we go a whole session.
Yeah.
And run out of gas and leave them.
Wherever they are.
Yeah. And then we walk back to the hotel, and we get more. And now we're telling people. And we're pulling out. So now we got like
you guys.
Distributors are coming out, and they've got no gloves and no they're borderline getting frostbite, you know. Ranquet ran over Ruben, our photographer, took him out for the trip, you know. And so we, you know, in the morning you wake up and this whole hillside is just covered with snowmobiles that are like stuck or out of gas.
Oh my God.
And they know it's us, but they won't accuse us, and they won't do anything. And we just kind of like, I don't know, it's weird. And then the next night, again, you know, do it again. We had a lot of fun. So we had a lot of trips like that where we just kind of.
Yeah, that's some mischief right there. That's crazy. Jake seemed like, I haven't talked to him yet, but he seemed like he was an introvert. Like of the team, there were a lot of extroverts. Russell is a extrovert.
Russell and Dale together
Yeah.
is a comedy show.
Well, Dale's not a huge extrovert. Oh yeah, he's extroverted.
But the two of them, they really feed off each other, and it's it's hilarious.
Yeah.
It's so fun. And then
Yeah.
Jake is he's very much an introvert. He's a super smart guy. He's a powerhouse rider.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was my roommate for years, but he's just low key. But then he does weird stuff. He'll go like, we were at Stratton at this house, and he finds this like duck call,
Yeah.
or turkey call,
Sure.
in the closet, and he'll like run hide behind a bush, like a plant, and just do the turkey calls, and then he's got like an owl call, and he's like hiding behind, like he climbs behind the sofa, and you're just like, what is he doing?
What the hell is going on?
For like an hour,
Oh,
it's just
nice.
weird,
Yeah,
but
that's
funny.
awesome. Yeah, that's incredible.
And so he was just always like hanging out, he's like, he was always there, like, oh, hey, how long you been here? I've been here the whole time. Oh, okay.
He's got a room at Russell's house still now, I think.
Does he?
Yeah, yeah. I didn't realize how tight-knit of a family it was until talking with Chris, and I'm going, oh, that's unique in snowboarding for sure. Like that one of the major teams is, traveling around, doing photo shoots together, doing contests together.
Living together in summers.
Yeah, yeah.
We all lived in Southern California.
Yeah,
we
in
all
Southern Cal.
lived in the same houses and stuff, and you're just constantly together.
And at that time, around that same time, Ride is in the news. Like, we're talking world news. Because it's the very first snowboard company to go public. I don't think that people can understand how big of an impact that had on the community.
Do you remember Ken Park, the skater?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so Ken was like, he moved to New York, and he was working in, the Wall Street world, and he's like, it's crazy. People, every boardroom I go into, they're talking about snowboarding.
That's
all
nuts.
of them.
Yeah, yeah.
And, so the timing and the road shows that were going on, because Jamie and Tim are out talking, and the crew are out there talking it up, and people were eating it up, and the stock went bananas. It was crazy. Tim was Entrepreneur of the Year or something crazy. On the covers of magazines, and it's a wild success story. It'd be really interesting to see if it could ever be repeated in the sport.
I don't think it can be repeated in any sport. Like, I don't know. It's so hard to tell. Like, snowboarding, like, when you think about that it was in the Olympics in 98, like, that kind of came out of left field. Like, it didn't feel like, when you're competing in 93, 94, it's not like you're thinking, okay, 4 more years we'll be in the Olympics. I don't know about you, but, like, for me, it was like, we probably will never get in the Olympics because there's too much crazy shit going on.
See, I was on the Pro Riders Association when I was at Burton.
Yeah.
And so it was like a group of riders, all these different teams, and some of the crew, like the guys who were doing contest organizing and stuff like that, and the governing bodies. And we were looking at, like, how do you take the sport forward? And we're having those discussions. And, one of the things, I think, I don't know who it was. I want to say it was Ted Martin, but maybe it wasn't him. Was said that, monster trucks and wrestling are some of the top things on television, so we have to be more like them. And I remember going, what are you talking about?
Wow.
Like, we are nothing like them, and we'll never be like them. And we're going to do what we do, and let's keep it real. We're not ready for the big stage.
Right.
Our equipment falls apart at the start of a competition. Like, disintegrates.
Yeah.
We carry wickets in our pockets to put it back together so we can compete in the world championships.
Right.
We're not ready. The pipes are hand dug by the competitors. There's nothing about the sport that's ready for that stage.
Right.
When we're ready, they're going to come. And so I always knew that it was going to become bigger. Was my bet. I was not involved. I kind of dropped out of the contest scene, so I was no longer involved in how or all those pieces came together. But I'll tell you, when Salt Lake happened, and I sat in the stands and I watched the level of competition, the quality of the pipe, the day was beautiful, the crowd was nuts. I was like, it's here and it was ready.
Yes.
Like it delivered.
Absolutely.
And it was cool. Like those guys, every one of them, and everything from, the grenade crew stenciling and spray paint on the back of the guys carrying the cameras, and the Finnish kid, with the Mohawk, I forgot his name.
Heikki Source.
Yeah, so he rode so good. Like, Ross rode incredible. Everyone rode really great. It was so fun to see that energy. And then, being on American soil and having an American sweep just added to the storyline.
Totally.
And I mean, I remember I drove out from Tahoe. I watched the thing, and I turned around and drove back. And I was like, that was insane. I can't even believe I was able to witness that in person.
Yeah, when you think about it, was 10 years earlier is, Craig taking that world championship you're talking about. Maybe 11 years. But, like, it just, like you said, it wasn't ready.
It wasn't even close.
It's bizarre.
And you see the old videos. I mean,
yeah.
It's hilarious. You're like, what are we doing? I mean, it's so funny. You got to get a wide angle and get low because you're barely off the ground.
Well, because you had to have a highway, and then there was no landing. Like it was, and it would ice over. Mm-hmm. You know the number of people that have told me that at one of those contests they got knocked out. They wake up and Tom's yelling like, "Don't move him! His neck might be broken." Like it was chaos.
Totally, yeah, and it was so fun.
Yeah, I was chasing it at that time, and feeling like a connection with you guys. Like you guys are a year or two ahead. We would look at you, and that's what we would be doing. Tuck knees. My buddy Chris and I practiced tuck knees for months, so that we can grab the board right, look at the pictures, his hand over his knee, which one, this way, okay, cool. Or Japan's, like how Brushy would tweak stuff.
I could never do the Japans well.
Nobody could do
my
them
knees
like
didn't do that. Noah could do them well, and Brushy could do them well. There's a few. Adam Merriman did them really well. There's some guys that just really could like slap that front knee down, but for some reason mine didn't go. The back knee would put a hole in the board.
Yeah, remember the two-tongue boots and just tweaking. Like the bindings were, if you heard like a sales pitch on the bindings, they're like, these ones are made to tweak, like so that you could, when you lean back on them, you can carve, but when you lean sideways, it's just floppy. Yeah. Yeah, man.
They come off the board about, 3 centimeters.
Totally.
And then they break every time.
Yeah. Well,
mine would take about a day to break, and then I could ride them for about, 3 weeks, and then I have to get a new pair.
Yeah. So how did that work? Would they give you 4 or 5 pairs at a time? Or?
With Burton, you just, whatever you needed. But you're on the road constantly, so you can only carry so much stuff.
Was there a downside to that? Like, did you get burned out on it at any point, or was it
on the travel?
Yeah.
No. When you're that age, you're totally, I think one year I was still living at my mom's house in Vermont, and I think I spent 9 days at home that year, and there were never more than 3 days in a row. And so you would just ship bags of stuff home. Yeah. Go to UPS and drop a full bag of dirty stuff and just send it home, and then you get new stuff, enough. Yeah. And it wasn't obscene. Some of the guys would really, I heard stories, what Duck would do, and he would load up on gear and just order everything. I actually never ordered anything. It just came. Wow. And I just didn't, I don't know, I just didn't abuse it. I hear you. And I also wasn't, I wasn't leaving equipment anywhere either. I was kind of riding it, and then I was, I'd sell it. But, I'd sell it cheap. Yeah. But I'd sell it to friends and be like, "Hey, here's a board for $100 or something like that."
The $100 boards were like, that was the best.
But some of them were ridden pretty hard.
Yeah. I bought a Rado Lamb from him for $100. T-bolts. It broke in like a couple of weeks. Yeah. Yeah.
But that was the game. We didn't have any money really, so you had to sell your equipment to keep the dream alive. Yeah. And I didn't keep a single board. Wow. Until Ride, and I kept some of them. There's a few that I hung on to that were ones that I actually rode and are iconic to me, I think. But but I didn't have a single, like a couple of the Burtons, and they were the boards no one's wanted. It's like, oh, there's an M6 race board. And
Yeah,
there's a,
yeah.
the KF1 that never hit,
I love it.
that traveled. I probably carried it around the world, and I never actually put a binding on it.
That's nuts.
Yeah.
So who headhunts you from Ride, or were you putting the feelers out there?
Yeah.
Did you know it was over? Like, were you like, yeah, what happens for the end of Ride?
It just, the dynamic changed. The, that team, we have each other's back thing that I really loved right away.
Yeah.
And I was just losing it, and I was like, all right, so I want to do something different. And a lot of people that run around taking credit for the whole thing. And my approach was always like, no, it's us. This was always a we thing in my mind.
Right.
There were things that I did that I felt were good for the company, but I still viewed it as a we thing. And so, it came time to, my contract came up, and I had this proposal, and then they sort of countered exactly how I expected them to counter, which was kind of, for me, was like, yeah, I don't want to be here anymore.
Really? It was like a bummer? Like, you kind of knew.
Yeah.
That
I said, this is like that. I knew, like, that's the direction I think I expected you to go, and there was no deal.
Oh, wow.
And I got on the plane, I flew back to San Diego, and I'm like, yeah, I'm out.
What was your proposal? Was it like...
Yeah, I mean, it was basically, I wanted to Craig had come out with a supermodel line.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I'm going to do my own line. My pro models are selling really well. I'm selling 5,000 or 6,000 of these things a year.
That's insane.
And so let's do a line, let's see if we can't do 10 or 12.
Yeah.
And then not do so much of the branded line, like
right.
Jason Ford line, but I'm like, I'm going to get royalty in the whole thing. We'll push this whole thing as a series.
Yeah.
But I need the full size run.
Yes.
And I wanted my royalty, which was like $8 a board, and my retainer was small. It was like $4,000 a month or something, some travel. It wasn't a lot for the time. And then they counted, and they just cut my commission, my royalty in half.
To 4, right.
And I'm like, nah.
Yeah.
And, the guys that I expected to be in the room that day weren't in the room. They sent others. And so that pissed me off. So I took, they countered with that, which is very much Jamie coaching, right? It's how Jamie operates, which, it's kind of this, it's predictable and awesome. In some ways, and kind of lame in others, right? So you're looking at, and so I grabbed this, there was a little pocket calculator on the table, and I picked it up, and I just started banging numbers, and I wasn't hitting anything. I was just hitting numbers randomly.
Yeah.
And then I looked at the guy, and I said, I want to do this differently. I want $14,000 a month.
Nice.
And he just froze. And I said, well, let me know what you want to do. And I got up and I walked out.
Wow.
And I went to the airport.
Wow.
And that was that.
Airport to go home?
I flew to San Diego.
Yeah.
And I called Trent Smith over at Silence, and I said, I need some blank boards. How fast can you make them?
Yeah.
I'm going to New Zealand and, Australia. I'm going to be gone for a month. I leave in X amount of days. He's like, I could have them, in 2 weeks. I said, great, make me 2.
Yeah.
And so he made these blank boards for me.
Wow.
And then I flew down there, and then the day my contract expired, I sold my boards, my ride boards, and I started riding the blanks.
Yeah.
And then that was that.
And had you fished around for new stuff?
Yeah. So basically I called Brad Stewart, who I was going to start a snowboard company with before Ride.
Yeah.
And I said, hey, Brad, I'm leaving Seattle right now. I'm flying home. I'm going to leave Ride. Want to start that snowboard company.
Cool.
Oh, and by the way, I can take as many team riders with me as I want. And he goes, interesting. I'm about to fly to meet Solomon about launching Solomon and Bonfire Snowboards.
Right.
And I said, well, I'm in.
Cool.
And then, basically I flew to New Zealand with that deal already done. I started talking to riders and trying to build the team out from there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then,
who did Solomon hit the ground running with as a team?
It wasn't the people I lined up, not all of them. We had some good ones.
Yeah.
But in the U.S., it was me. It was Jake Blattner came over, Michelle Taggart, J2, Tucker Franzen.
Oh, wow.
So that was the team.
That's great.
So it's a mixture of some bonfire guys.
Yep. Yep.
And then what we added, and then we, I'm probably getting timelines mixed up, but we had we had Trevor Andrew for a while. We had Daniel Frank. We had Michael Chuck. We had, of course, the European guys like Benedict and Steve Groover and Vole and Annie and, Pitchy. And so we had a pretty fun group. It was a very international group.
Cool.
And it was a totally different journey, completely the most opposite journey of ride imaginable.
Like everybody is their own brand, out on their own, doing their own thing.
Well, there's a bit of team. The team thing was very much alive with Twos and Tucker. With Todd Franzen, and Blattner, and I. The four of us traveled together quite a bit.
Rad.
And Michelle was there. Of course, she was in the mix. And then, but then the Europeans, Trevor signed a deal, didn't want to be there, and he bailed. Daniel signed a contract and never showed up for anything, to the point where they actually wouldn't pay him unless he arrived at the things. You have to physically come to the U.S. Open
what was going
to
on
get
there?
to get your check.
Yeah.
Instead of just getting it monthly, it was no, it's weighted around the events. You have to arrive.
Because he had stopped
he
showing
was
up.
The slippery hot dog, and he just never, this thing or the weather. He'd make up stories, right? And so it was hilarious and predictable.
Amazing.
And then you've got Benedict, who was so talented,
consummate professional,
right?
Yeah.
And what he was doing, the robot food stuff and on,
unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, so it was a different mix, but I think that the part that was really different wasn't so much the team thing; it was more the company.
Oh yeah.
And it was at Ride we could make decisions and change things, and at Solomon it was very different with the French culture, with the large ski ownership.
Yeah, were they that vibe that you get at a European heli lodge, where it's snowboarders are still kind of the new guys, I still get it from...
Yeah, not so much. It wasn't like that. I mean, well, first of all, if you go to the factories...
Yeah.
The quality and the attention to detail, I've never seen anything like it. It's spotless. It's recycle 100% of everything in 96.
Wow.
Insane amount of robotics.
Right.
I'm watching ski bindings be assembled, and there's no human interaction at all.
Wow.
The things are just coming together. There's robotic forklifts. The whole thing is being done through robotics. It's incredible.
How old of a brand is Solomon?
100 years plus.
Yeah, and they were dominating skiing when I came into it. I don't know anything about skiing.
Yeah, they started out manufacturing saw blades and things like that.
Oh,
so
wow.
it was a very when I was there, a very old family business.
Yeah.
And so their model wasn't about we're going to come in and dominate, which was my model. I was we're going to come in and fuck shit up. We're going to own everything.
Awesome.
I'm talking to Terrier. I'm talking to Todd Richards. I'm talking to all these guys.
Yeah.
About what if we all come together here and really hit it with good quality stuff.
Yeah.
And the money to go do it. What Solomon didn't want to do is they didn't want to come in like the big ski company. I was everyone's afraid of you.
Right.
Why are you sneaking in the room?
Right.
Just show up. We'll kill it.
Yeah.
We'll absolutely crush, because they expect us to crush. You come in, they're going to be oh, that guy's not so tough.
Right.
And so that we disagreed on that. The product lines required so much testing and varied feedback, global feedback, to the point where I was doing tests, constantly testing in product meetings, working with developers. And then I finally got to the point where I'm I could see my ideas were getting really watered down, a lot. And I'm going, so how are you, how do you score my vote? If I fill out a review of a piece of product, and then you do the same with, somebody, a beginner from Finland and an intermediate person from Japan and somebody else, how do you put them all together? And they said, it's all scored equally.
Oof.
And I said, well, that's good to know. Remove me from the experiment. Like, what do you mean? And I'm like, if you're going to take my feedback and, put that on par with somebody who doesn't have the experience, then leave me out, because I don't want to be a part of it. Like,
Wow.
I can tell how this equipment works in 2 to 3 turns. Like, I know what's going on, and I know what we're looking for.
Yeah.
And maybe they do. I'm guessing they don't. We're on different levels. So, so that dynamic changed a little bit. It just took a long time to get equipment where it was like, and then we finally developed, like, the Fastback was my pro model.
Yeah.
And, my name was only on it for a year, and then it just became the Fastback series. But that one did really well, and I love the way it rode. And
yeah, I did a demo on them at Whistler, and it was difficult to get a read on what's happening here. Like, I'm not, like, there was that feeling of like, okay, you guys are a couple of years late. I mean, Brazzi was in shops in 91 or 92, so they kind of got a pass. And then K2 was even before that, right? Like, so I thought the messaging here was that you guys were going to just be skiing and you didn't really care for snowboarding. We needed like an apology or something is what it felt like from my side. It was like, okay. But there was also that feeling, like you said, like we were afraid. These guys coming in could potentially just like shake everything up. So do we want to have this on lock, or do we want to see it go up the street to, like what's the distribution going to be like? Are your Solomon ski dealers going to get first grab at this thing? And if it's really good, are we going to be fucked? Like that really was a feeling. And then when I rode the boards, I was like, I felt like they rode amazing, but I also felt like so did Rozzy and so did, Mervyn in their own way. Like it wasn't so far and above that it was like, oh my God,
yeah,
drop everything. I have to have this. And then the graphics were kind of, they didn't really go.
Well, that was a piece that was really tough to swallow.
Yeah.
So very different than the Jamie.
Right.
We make an adjustment,
Yes.
in a living room on the fly. It was
Yeah.
like, hey, we've got a graphic story that looks pretty good. And then all of a sudden we see it arrive. And we're like, where did these come from?
Right.
We've never seen these graphics before. And like, oh, it was a change was made at, HQ.
Yep.
And it was basically, someone higher up wanted to get their fingerprints on it. And that's the fingerprints they put. And
Interesting.
you're like, don't like those fingerprints so much.
Yeah. It was
So it was hard.
It was too clean, but it wasn't clean in the right way. I remember looking at them going, are these the production
Well, the
boards?
color wheel was like a safe way to do it.
Yeah.
That was the start. Start with the silver ones.
Yeah.
And then the color wheel.
Yeah.
And then it started. I don't even know what it did with the graphics, but it was not. It's also a time when graphics were kind of blah overall. There wasn't a lot of
Absolutely.
standouts.
Yeah.
But yeah, we just. I feel like we left a lot on the table. Like with Ride, I don't feel like we left much on the table
No.
because the equipment was terrible. Like
Sure.
it was so heavy and not
Sure.
good. But we made it work. But we created this scene, this image, and this culture that was.
It had the rider story. That was the
Mm-hmm.
thing. It was so easy.
In Solomon,
Like,
they had like a million
yeah.
patents. They would create patents like every week in their sleep, that were improving the sport.
Right.
The patents that became standardized, like one tool.
Right.
How about if we use one tool to work on your bindings?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Nice.
That didn't exist before. People are using all these odd tools and and you're cutting your hands and you know what I mean?
was
Like
insane.
just
Yeah.
to set up, not even
Yeah.
customized, just to get it to function.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, it's just going to work with a normal screwdriver and everything's good to go.
One screwdriver. Yeah, that's really smart.
The screws that didn't fall out of your base plates, they put the little plastic things on. That's just
Incredible.
that's us changing bindings on the Glacier so many times over and over. And someone's like, what if we
Yeah.
have the screws not fall off?
Great idea. Really.
Obvious.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they had the patent for years, and so there was a lot of those contributions. Even talking to some of the product managers at Burton, they were like, "No, that's good. That pushed Burton, pushed everybody to think differently."
Yeah.
But there was some stuff we left on the table. There was a lot of talented riders there, and the watered down. So and they're not a marketing company. That's not the way they operate. They're a different brand.
Yeah, you saying it now, like, because Emmanuel and I had a very quick talk about it. because I was like,
He struggled with it.
yeah, well, he was like, the boards are the best in the world. He's like, listen, this stuff was hands down better than anything else you could ride. And I was like, I don't know, those Rossi boards were just so good for so long. Like, once they hit their pace, they just, like, when you would go to a demo and you would try out a Rosino board that's like torsion wrapped foam, but the foam is different densities and different parts. A Rossi board out of the bag was like one of the most fun things ever to ride, until your friends saw you riding it and they're like, does that have a corn cob on the top of it? Is that an entire board that is a corn cob? Are you serious?
You're
but
like,
they rode well. Yeah.
Somehow I overlooked that.
Yeah. But he seemed to be comparing them to, like, I don't even want to throw anybody under the bus, but like, there were a few board companies that their boards were hard to ride. They just didn't have engineering.
Well, then I heard, who did I hear? I heard Benedict say was like, he thought the boards were hard. He's like, these boards are built for landing. He's like, and I was like, for me with the boards, I like to put, you put 100% in, I want more than 100 back.
Sure.
And some boards just suck it all out. You get 20% back. You're like, are we doing this right now? Is this any fun?
Right.
Are there even bindings attached to this thing because there's so little return? And then, so I was like, how much can we get?
Yeah.
That was the chase I was after. I was like, how much return can we get? Because when you're riding hard snow and it's just firm, it's like, that's when you're riding POW, different dynamics. You're getting, totally different response. So I was on that different pursuit, but, David, his comment, I'm like, why were they hard to ride? I mean, you get cars that are difficult to drive, surfboards that are hard to ride. Like, I'm like, were they? Because I never felt that.
No, the ones that I tried were ultra smooth. Like, I understood, like, if you were going for somebody who wants a high performance board, that is going to go top to bottom groomers at Whistler. The boards were perfect.
So they started with a 52.
Yeah,
that was the first size.
Right.
So imagine, I'm like, that's what I rode for an entire season. I'm going up to the Yukon on a trip with Craig and Tex.
On a 52.
And they're getting out of the helis in Texas riding some monster.
75.
Right? Whatever he's
something.
on is large. And Craig's not that much far behind. He's in a 60-something.
69. He had a 69.
And I'm like, I'm taking this thing and just putting it under my thing, like leaning down. And so maybe I went over the bars a couple times.
Yeah, I guess so. On a 52, of course.
And so it was, and then it's like, oh, we're going to do a 56 next. I'm like, when? I didn't get a 56 until I think summer.
Wow,
okay, well,
man.
that's a whole year on a 52, on a silver 52 with no nose and tail kick.
Yeah, that's bizarre.
And it's just, and so that was some of the struggles. You're kind of like, you're dealing with these different philosophies, and there's a lot of stuff that they gave. I think that they contributed to the sport that was healthy and good, and then there's the challenges that we dealt with too.
Yeah. That trip with Craig and Tex. How many trips post Burton do you get to hang out with Craig? And what was it like? Was it,
It was after Ride.
Yeah.
I didn't do any with Ride. I think there was some bitterness because I quit Burton in the middle of a contract. And so, that's like I don't know if anybody had done that to that point. And
not at that level.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
they let me out of the deal, which was, nice of them. But I was definitely ignored and shunned. And,
by your former teammates, like not just Craig, but like
Brand. I think there was a lot of trash talking and stuff that was going down. And a lot of people never heard, they didn't know the story. And I'm like, well, there's a lot to that story. And so when I started with Solomon, Craig called and then we were also part of Island Lake Lodge because of, Ride got some money. We invested in Island Lake. So Craig was an owner. I was an owner. Jake Blattner was an owner. Mark Gallup and Scott Schmidt. And so, and then there was a bunch of money guys too that were in, but we were like the industry people. So we're the smaller investors, but we definitely took the most advantage of the terrain.
Yes. Yeah.
And so then, you're spending more time at the lodge with Craig, and then he starts to call and invite me on trips and and vice versa. And I had always set trips up, like going back to the Burton days, the first trip I told you I did with Rod Walker, I figured it out. I was like, okay, so if I do a trip and I mix the crew and I bring people from other companies and I get media here, they're going to do a story. I'm basically like building a story before, because team managers weren't doing that yet.
Right.
And so I did a trip to Colorado, and I invited Noah because I like to ride with Noah, and I invited Craig. So Noah was on Morrow, it was Craig, Noah, and I. And then we had John Foster, and I had,
Oh, wow.
Lee Crane, and that was the crew, and we just traveled through Colorado, and we shot different stuff, and that cover of Craig and I in Loveland Passes from that trip.
So cool.
And yeah, so it's like I figured it out, and then Craig figured it out also, and so we just. We're like, how do you get coverage?
Right.
And we're like, well, let's set things up. Let's make it easy. Let's come up with an idea, pitch the idea, get some buy-in, and get the right people there, and hope that the snow's good.
Yeah, you just had such a professional. Craig had that too, like just a professional outlook on what you were doing.
Yeah, and I paid attention to him. He was my hero. So you're looking at all that stuff, and you're learning, and then you're trying not to walk in his exact footsteps. And you're like. As much as you would like to, you're not letting yourself walk in the exact footstep.
Right. I get it. I totally get it.
It was a weird dynamic because then you're around, you're kind of like, this guy's awesome, he's my hero, and you're trying to be cool, like, oh no, I'm good, I'm I'm coming for you, or whatever. It was kind of silly, but.
So in the Solomon days, you guys do a couple of trips. How
we did a bunch. We did one a year almost.
That's so rad.
We did quite a few.
Yeah. Was he still doing stories for the magazines to fulfill some sort of contract obligations?
He never spoke about his contract. As much as I wanted him to give me anything that I could learn from, he would share nothing. He would listen. That's for sure. He would listen, but there was no
reciprocation on that. For as much good press as Jake and Donna got from supporting Craig when he made that decision, which is a hard decision. I asked her that in her interview, like, was it like, hooray, Craig's quitting competition? And it was like a no. They were not stoked, but they listened to him and said, okay, if he's saying that, we can't just listen to him when he's saying stuff we like. So,
well, from my experience, when I told Jake I was quitting competing in racing, it was at the bottom of a Super G run at Buttermilk, and I crashed, chattered out on those floppy PJs. Yeah, blew my shoulder out, slid it. God knows how fast. My shoulder dislocated. Wow. Stopped, put it back in, rode right down to Jake, and said that was it. That was the last time I put on hard boots. And he's like, "We need more American racers. We don't need more American freestylers." I said, well, we can figure out what that looks like, but I'm not doing that anymore. Wow. And that was, so Jake was about results. And that's, you think about all the Olympic years with Sean and whoever else, right? McMorris. Yeah. He loved the competition, and he loved seeing Burton riders on the podium.
Tom, that probably comes from the fact that in the beginnings of competition, Tom just had it so wrapped up. Like those Tom years with the Kidwell Roundtail, and every single pro you can imagine on the team. Yep. Probably Jake was like, I want to win. I want my guys to win. I want to make equipment.
And he's just insanely competitive. Yeah. Whether it's his sports teams that he cheers for, or he's playing golf, or he's playing whatever game he's playing, he was very, very competitive.
Yeah. So said that Craig had to take a substantial pay cut, like
I'd heard that,
really, really big one.
Yeah, I'd heard that too.
So then I guess that's his side hustle. Is he's starting to think of other projects, Island Lake.
Well, I think part of it too was the Island Lake stuff. Nobody got rich on it, but we made some money. And Craig got shares for free, and we, not just what he bought, but he also got shares for free. We didn't get any for free. We just, we didn't think that way. But I think that I assume that he was tired of doing the same thing. Yeah. And that's the part with snowboarding. It does get monotonous if you aren't reinventing yourself. And I got to reinvent myself. I had three versions. I had three careers in one career.
Yeah.
3 versions of myself, and they were all completely different.
Totally.
The Burton, I have binders upstairs that have, photos and whatever, and it's like, it's chronicled by my sponsors. There's the Burton life, there's the Ride life, and there's the Solomon life, and they are nothing alike.
Right. Yeah, there's no through line between...
There's no results in my Solomon life.
Right.
And there was X Games and whatever, things that I did, but I'm like, I didn't care.
Right.
Like, there was no care. There was no result that would change my destiny as a snowboarder. Whether I won, but if I got hurt and wrecked and broken, that would change it. But that's the only thing, So I would imagine that you stay with the same sponsor and you do it for that long. You're like, I have to mix this up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Stay sane, And 3 years, for me, 3 years was always a good marker.
Is that what it was? 3 years, 3 years, 3 years?
3, and then 8.
3, 3, 8. Yeah.
And at Solomon, I was like, after 8 years, I'm kind of like, I need to, and it was really Craig's passing that I just needed to, I'm like, I need to change. I can't just do this.
Is that what is, so that was 2003.
It's going to be 20 years.
Oh,
Isn't that crazy?
God. This season.
Yeah, Kelly Jo sent me a message the other day, and she's like, come up, it's the 20 year. I want to do this small thing. And I'm like, I can't believe it's 20 years.
20. That's nuts.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so crazy. So were you like a full-on pro rider?
I was still, so
up until
2003, I was living in Jackson Hole.
Yeah.
It was the last year of my third Solomon contract. And I had positioned a 10-year deal.
Yeah.
There was discussions to transition and sort of evolve the role to get more into the company.
Right. But
So
you hadn't already done that. Like that
I
didn't
was
happen
still
in
like, I'd pop in.
Yeah.
Hey,
yeah.
here's all my great ideas, and then I'd see you later.
You'd avoided the sitting at a desk and yeah. Oh, good for you.
So Krebs, Krebs is like, hey, we need you to be more like
Yeah.
less of a judge and more of a player.
Yeah.
You need to be in the mix. And I was like, okay, and I was like, well, I started to play it out in my mind. I'm like, well, I could do this 10-year deal. It's kind of like their, the term ambassador hadn't been coined, but like that.
I got you. That's rad.
And then fall into this thing where I had, several trips and this routine, and then ingrain myself in the company and see where that took me.
Yeah.
And in my mind, I thought I knew how far I could go there. And then I was like, I feel like I'm just treading water.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I don't feel like there's this evolution I need.
Yeah. Yeah.
As a person.
8 years of
and then the Craig thing, I was like, it wasn't that I was afraid of the snow.
Right.
At all. That still doesn't occur to me very often. So that wasn't there. And then there was the, I just felt like the sport was at a place too where it was lost, and I didn't want to be part of it from that side of the business. Like, oh, we're going to build a thing and try to market products that fit into a culture that's lost.
Right.
Doesn't know what they want.
Right.
And so that's when I, decided to start the magazines and, get into the magazine world with Foster. And
so what was that?
John Foster, he was over at Transworld. He was editor-in-chief at the time, and he wanted to do like a journal, like a hard, like the Surfer's Journal.
Yeah.
For snow. And he came to Jackson Hole, and we spent a couple days and we talked about it, and I was really weighing it out. Should I do this? And this is prior to Craig. And then and the Craig thing happened, and I was like, okay, I think that's what I want to do. I went out to the service, and I was like, I think that's the type of thing I want. I want to try to celebrate a different part of snowboarding through print, which was the medium at the time. And then, away we went. We got into the print world to raise some money, and, told Solomon I'm not going to do anything else. Like, we're good. This was awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
They ran out and picked up Dirksen immediately. Dirksen, I think, just got my contract, just moved to Josh. which is great. But, I was like, all right, well, that door is now no
Yeah,
longer available
yeah,
for me.
Yeah.
And then we got into the magazine world and, figured that out.
How did it go?
It was hard. First of all, we went out there and we built a plan and we raised some money and we thought we raised enough, and you quickly realize that you didn't raise enough. And so our model was, we want to compensate people.
Yeah.
If we're going to use your images, we're going to pay you, and we're going to use your words, we're going to pay you.
It's so important.
And we're not just going to, beg, borrow, and steal, which, was probably part of our demise, because it's really hard to survive and pay everybody, because there's just, everyone's cheap. Everybody wants they want a free magazine. They don't want to help support it, even if it's $1 a copy or whatever.
Right.
And so that is a difficult.
Like we were talking off mic, like it's not really in selling the magazine that the money is. Like if you're paying attention, it's like selling a car ad in there. You're kind of drawing this energy from this money from out in the big money
Well,
world.
in us, we wanted to limit our advertisers.
Right.
So already you're saying, not only is it hard on newsstand, and it's expensive to print and ship these things because we're doing high quality, so it's heavy.
Yes.
And then you add the fact that we're limiting our upside in advertising, and then we were doing a little bit more nostalgia and sort of paying homage to the Craigs and those people, that was appreciated sort of, but it was early. It was too early. Yeah.
It was too early because like you're saying, snowboarding was kind of lost, and it didn't have that anchor, and it had never looked back yet, because it was always like, what's next year's thing? Oh, it's going to be step in. Oh, now it's going to be, a toe strap that goes over your, a toe cup or whatever. Like there was always some sort of buzzword or some new invention, like that was invented to be the next new thing.
Yeah.
There was never like, who's going to put together a team of legends, or who's going to support, Brushy after he's off ride or whatever. There was none of that. Nothing.
Well, and then you have us, we're trying to figure it out and keep it, do this version of Pure and do limited number of issues per year and whatever. And then I realized we printed 2 issues, and I'm like, we don't have enough money. Because you're seeing the cost and you're seeing the revenue, and you're like, okay. And keep in mind, Foster and I never run the books like that ever.
Right.
We just called ourselves publisher. I was like, that's a good idea. We'll each be, a co-publisher. It's cool.
Yeah.
Seems like a good title. We'll go with this for a while. So then we started to posture the business to be sold. And by the 5th issue, we had new ownership. So that was Future.
Okay.
Bought us, and then they were launching, Future Snowboarding and a bunch of other things. And then I got transitioned over to run that group. And so it was 5 years of magazine publishing.
Oh, wow.
And then, Future one day just decided, like, we're done. We're not going to invest in this. We're going to stay in the video game industry, which is where they make their money. And even though they thought that it was a similar mindset from action sports as gamers, and they could find parallels, they just, the leadership there was like, no, we're gonna stay pure.
There was a weird time in there where X Games, video games, they were trying to put things together. And
well, some people put it together. Tomahawk did pretty well putting it together.
Yeah, yes. But that's like Tomahawk put together. The game was skateboarding for like a video console as opposed to...
Genius.
Yeah, I mean, he made a lot of money. Definitely, a lot of people made a lot of money on that.
Yeah. That
partnership. But he took a lot of heat for it too, right? Like he had to...
He's always taken a lot of heat.
Since he was a kid, absolutely.
It's never... I don't think the industry's been that kind to him.
No, I don't think so either.
And I've listened to some of his things, and he's very generous and very kind in return to an industry that seems to have been really tough on him.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. Totally. That's the vibe I'm getting for sure. But I mean, he also is like one of the guys that made the money there. Like in snowboarding, there's not very many people. Like Shaun White's not making what Tony Hawk made. There is a Shaun White video game, but not in the same.
Yeah, it's not the same.
No, and skateboarding is just way bigger than snowboarding as an industry. as a thing. I'm surprised it went to the Olympics, but I guess I haven't been following it. So, like, competitive skateboarding has been doing really well, right? Like, television wise and all that
I don't
stuff.
know. I mean, viewership numbers and stuff. You just, let's just face it. It's all hard.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter what you're doing in any industry. It's hard. And if you're not going to like buckle in and work hard,
Right.
if you're just going to do it purely as a lifestyle business,
Yeah.
you better just love it, because it's going to have some bumps, you know,
Yeah,
and they're going to be hard,
yes,
you know,
totally.
those are going to be hard. So, but to survive and there is no overnight success. You know, Ride was probably the closest thing to, you know, launch and boom, explosion that I've ever seen.
Well, that's a really good point. Ride wouldn't have worked when Chuck and Ernie and Jake and Tom are prototyping shit that doesn't work. And
70% of what you send out the door is returned for replacement because it breaks.
Right. So like, Ride exploded right at exactly the time where you basically had a generic board. Elan was making boards for enough people that their boards were fine.
Yeah.
They were heavy, but they actually worked fine. And they could print good graphics, and they had a good turnaround, and they had a capacity for making them. Like, that couldn't have happened before that time. Right? And I think
I don't see a way to do it. And then it's just really like, when we were doing the magazines and I was explaining to, you know, my bosses, I just kept saying Volcom wasn't built in a day. That was because it's like, this thing was a sticker and t-shirt company. Let's all face it.
Yeah.
And 10 years later, everyone's like, look at the success. And it's like, it's 10 years.
It takes 10 years.
10 years. It really does.
Yeah.
And so, and I would never discourage anybody from like jumping in and figuring out, because there's a lot of creativity that can surprise us.
Yes.
But it is a grind.
Well,
it is a total grind.
As soon as you start getting that success, you've got 10 people that are looking, going, we may be able to do this better, right? Like, think of how many times Jake had to fail forward, and the amount of stock that he would have sat on. Like, when you go all in on a year and then you just were off by a little bit, and somebody else just comes in and starts mowing your grass. Jeremy Jensen, who I would consider the top powder surfer in the world, right? Like, he rides like no binding boards like no one else, and he makes them, hand makes them too. But as soon as his boards got to the point where you could basically ride a resort on the board on a POW day, well, then Burton starts putting out POW boards, and they didn't have the overhead of making a bunch of crappy ones first. They can just make a board that works.
Yeah.
And with their distribution, he's literally sitting in his garage making every single one. They can just go, let's make, 1,500 of these over in Austria and price them a little cheaper and take over that whole genre.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's where we are in business now, is that if you've got a good idea, there's a good chance 20 other people have that good idea.
They have it, and a few of them are going to have, and they're all going to have a competitive edge in some area.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, who's going to pull the most pieces together and be successful?
And if you, with this whole venture capitalism, you can sell your good idea to people. I'm being reluctant right now because I've got a friend he's like 10 years into a bad idea, like where he's building expensive shit and getting that hype and rolling it along and finding investors in an idea that's not ever going to work. But the money people get, they're like, wow, this seems like a great idea. If this works, we're going to the moon.
Some people's business is that business.
Yeah. And his isn't. He really believes in his idea.
I've met people whose business is raising money.
Yeah, I could see it.
And they're good at that business.
I could see it.
And people jump in and they do the whole thing, and it's basically, they raise money and they burn money and they never give a return, and that's
Right.
just,
Right.
That's how some people operate. As sad as it sounds, it's how some people operate, you know. And
I think that's what I was
just
hearing on
always
the way
like
over here.
I have tried at least to be a part of brands and movements that can improve. Like, you know, each year you see that you're moving.
Yeah, and there's a passion in what they're
forward,
making,
and you're like,
right?
well, this is becoming legit, or this was struggling before, and now it's legit. Like, we can be a powerhouse.
Cool.
Like, we can look at this thing and go, look what we did. Holy crap, we did that. That's cool.
Right.
Instead of being like, no, we just, you know,
we raised a bunch
pedal.
of money.
We just pedal every day and just pedal.
Well, that's what I heard on the way over here was that someone is going to be the first trillionaire. I don't know who they were talking about, but they were basically saying that he's charismatic and he's a money-raising phenom, but he's giving most of it to charity, which makes people want to like invest in but he's not really doing anything. He's just like raising, like pulling out, he's like Robin Hood or something, pulling all this money out of investors and then just giving it to companies that, you know, that are working on the environment or whatever. So, I mean, of course, yeah.
It just goes back to you got to do what you love. Like,
yeah.
That's it. Just do the stuff you love.
Yeah.
You know, and if you don't, then what are you doing?
Right. As much as you want to hate on someone that's doing something like Jamie, who's raising money and buying brands and selling stuff cheap that's got like a cool label on it. And as much as I don't like that, he does. You could see he's joyful. He's having a great time.
Yeah.
And his kids are involved. And he's like, everybody here works for me. Look at that. Isn't that neat? You know, he loves it. So
I think that there's there's something about that.
But I just bring that up.
You don't have to agree with everybody's
practice,
beliefs. You know, you don't have to. You're never going to agree with everybody, and they're not all going to agree with you.
Right.
And so, why limit it to, you know, to one category? You know, it can apply to business.
I think it's really important that is the positive thing, because our generation, typically when we're talking off mic about how this generation's coming up and they're eliminating competitions. Everyone gets a ribbon, so there's no first, second, third. They're eliminating genders. They want to be called they, them, or they're eliminating all these things that were like stable for us that we really take comfort in. But if you pick below the surface a little bit, like, we didn't get to just follow what we love. You know what I mean? Like, if I loved flowers, I would have got beat up, like physically beaten. You know what I mean? Or if I loved something that was not like masculine, breaking things and being boisterous, I would have got, and then also extroverts versus introverts. Like, we just oppressed introverts forever, even though they do all the thinking, they come up with all the good ideas. It was like, you need to be loud. You need to put your face on a poster.
I think you don't need to be anything. You need to be you.
Correct.
You always just need to be you.
That's
and
it.
If you're in a circle or if you're in an environment that doesn't appreciate you for being you, what are you going to do about it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Are you going to adapt?
Right.
Fit into the environment?
Right.
You can make that choice. You're going to change environments? You can make that choice.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of people that don't. I get it all the time when I'm on like work calls, and they're like, "Oh, you're in San Diego. It must be nice." And I'm like, "Make good decisions, people."
Yeah, exactly.
I wasn't born here.
Yeah. Every time I go back to Ontario, I'm like, you don't have to live here at all. Like, no one has to. You can move wherever you want.
It's a big world, and there's lots of transportation available.
Choose what you want, and then go and get it. Absolutely.
Yeah, and if you want to sample,
like
a lot of people just cruise around, sample, and that's fine too. Like, do that. Like, I think that as long as people are doing what makes them happy and they're contributing, really, we're in a good spot.
At the end of the day, that's the only thing you get to experience is your life, like your experiences, what are coming in to your experiences. And if you've got a lever you can pull that makes those experiences better, you should probably do it. I think that's what snowboarding was, wasn't it? Like, it was like this thing came along, and at the time that you were a pro, there were no pros. You were a pro making money at a thing that if I would have told my parents that, you know, they would have been like, that's not a thing.
Oh, I never told people what I did because it was just like, it's too hard to explain.
Right.
'Cause it's always the same. What do you do? I snowboard professionally.
Right.
Wait, that's a thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a thing. You
Yeah.
make money?
Yeah.
How much money do you make? I can't tell you. We have confidentiality. Come on. Yeah. How much money you make? You know, it's like,
yeah.
So what do you say? I just kind of hang out.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
that was always the thing. I just hang out. Well, what do you do? I run around, chase winter when I can. And you just avoid it. You just move on. What do you do? You know, you just change the subject.
Yeah.
Because people didn't understand it.
And now,
and the last thing you want to do is get into this thing. Well, I make more money, you know, like that's
I make more
stupid.
money doing something I love.
Because that's a dumb conversation. Who wants to have that? Who wants to listen to that?
Right. Well, what ends up happening though is that now kids are like, my son's friend in, you know, high school was saying, I want to be a Red Bull athlete. Like that was his, you know, life goal. That was like, you know, he told his guidance counselor that, you know what I mean? And people know what that means. Ooh, a Red Bull athlete. You know, it's like saying I want to be an Olympian or something like that. Well, there's only, you know, it's every 4 years, there's only one guy that wins gold. Like that, everyone wants to be that guy. And it's hard. It's very, very difficult. But I think that has entered into the lexicon of, you know, even parents encouraging their kids. Like, I don't know, there's a lot of parents out there right now saying, like, you should be a bricklayer. Or, like, you know, it's like, you should, I mean, you should be a YouTube star or whatever it is. Yeah. It's very confusing.
And whatever the game is today, it's going to change in 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
It's going to entirely, and you know, so it's like, give the kids a good experience. Teach them the right values. If they like something, encourage it.
Yeah.
If they don't like something, move away from that, I guess, you know?
Yeah.
That's really it. And then you never really know. You know, my parents just let me go snowboarding and do my thing, and they didn't force me to do anything else. And that was pretty nice. Yeah. You know?
Yeah.
You just kind of go chase it.
And it worked out.
Yeah.
It worked out really, really well.
Awesome. A lot of fun, you know. We were very lucky.
Yeah. Like lightning striking. You know, it was, having just been there at Donner and seeing where it all began. I was at the Donner quarter pipe yesterday looking up going, this changed the world. This like one little run here changed the world.
And still some of the most iconic photos in the sport. I mean, really.
Yeah.
I mean, there was style.
TK on the hand plant. Keith Kimmel on
crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, I look at these things every time they turn up, you know. I mean, I'm such a huge Kidwell fan. And basically anybody, the early Sims team, they were it. That was the ones.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't look up to the Burton team. I looked up to the Sims team.
Yeah, right.
You know, it was Terry, it was Craig, it was Sean, it was Bert Lamar, it was Rob Morrow was on there. I mean, all these guys.
Todd, yeah.
Todd wasn't there yet. This was before Todd. I hadn't met Todd, you know? It's sort of like...
Oh, yeah, right.
So I'm talking like...
Yeah.
Mini Shred and that time, you know, those guys were... That was black and white quarter pipe shots, and the video is just insane.
I saw Wine Rock with my eyes yesterday. Wine Rock. It's huge. I would never hit that. It's dangerous. It'll just take you
flat
out.
Too. I've never seen it in person. I heard it's flat.
It's very flat. It's nuts, but it's actually huge. Like, I was wondering if it was like a lens trick, and I see what the lens trick is.
Did Terry even have high backs on that?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
But he definitely had style. Like, he's not flailing at all in that. And all the stuff of that era was flail. Like, when you'd see the videos of those sessions, you're like, wow. But that, you know, that one iconic image is like, it just makes you want to go out. Go snowboarding.
Yep.
Unreal.
It's a fun sport.
Awesome. Well,
thank you.
Thank you for having me in your home. and we got to go for a rip sometime when you're. Do you have a place up at Tahoe that you go to still?
We have a place in Mammoth.
In Mammoth.
Yeah.
Cool. I haven't been to Mammoth yet, so.
Yeah, it's fun. It's it's better for us with the kids. It's not as far. Tahoe's a bit of a hike in the car.
Yeah, I just flew.
9 hours and Mammoth's 6.
Yeah, 6 is kind of the edge.
Kids are older now, so they can handle it. But when they were younger, there's a lot of stops. It would take 8 hours, and you're kind of like,
oh yeah,
that's far.
Totally. Right on. Well, thank you again.
Thank you.
Awesome. FNRad shoutouts this week to Jason Ford and his family for letting me do this interview in their home. Also, thanks to Jason for showing me some of the absolute gems he's collected over the years. He's got a real archive of some heavy boards in amazing conditions. So sick to see. Congratulations to listener Adam O'Connor, who won last week's Beneath Apparel giveaway. Be sure to go to FNRad YouTube channel and comment "I want free 1910 shit" in the comments of this episode, or tag 3 friends in the Instagram post along with @1910, and I'll pick a new winner for this Sunday. Thanks so much to Scope and the Rad Hookup and killer interview. Be sure to come back next week for another episode of the FNRad Snowboard Podcast, presented by Vans and brought to you by FNRad Snowboarding.